I'm a 30-year-old man that lives in a very hot, chaotic, and crazy city from Latin America known by its inhabitants as Chaos City, where almost everything is possible. Even though I am quite passionate about supernatural, sci-fi, horror stories, and a firm believer in the old saying, evil comes in many forms, I am the only one from my group of friends that truly believes that aliens and ghosts are real. My friends make fun of me because of that, but I never thought I would experience something so terrifying that night. It was a night like any other. It was about 6 p.m., but the sky had darkened earlier than usual, and I was teaching my last online English class of that day through Skype. I was teaching one of my favorite students named Athena, who was a Venezuelan woman that lived in Mexico City. I asked her if she had any questions, and she said no. I reminded her to do her homework in order to continue her progress. I wished her a good night. We said goodbye to each other, and I ended the call. A couple of years ago, I had decided to work from home on my own business since I was tired of my extremely low salaries of my country's companies. I thought I made the right decision because it was going well for me. I planned to change my clothes to go out on my daily night run. I put on some black shorts with pockets, the white t-shirt I was wearing, and my running shoes. I grabbed my cell phone and organized a playlist of old school heavy metal songs that I wanted to listen to that night. I selected a song called Frayed Ends of Sanity from one of my favorite heavy metal bands and left it on pause. After that, I took my house keys and cell phone and put them inside my fanny pack. I opened my apartment door and went out and locked the door behind me. I got into the elevator and went down to the ground floor. I opened my building's door. I put my headphones on and put them almost at full volume. I started my run at 6:30 p.m. and was planning to run for at least an hour. My building was located in a closed neighborhood, so I always had to walk all the way down a steep street that looked especially dark and creepy at night in order to reach the neighborhood's entrance, which was the exit as well. All along, I had developed a good jogging pace and wasn't quite tired yet, but I had spent several weeks jogging inside my neighborhood where I could only listen to my music. The sound of trees and nature around me was a little creepy because a black cat scared the crap out of me one time, so I decided today was the day to try my luck at jogging outside my neighborhood. This scared me a little because of my city's insane levels of insecurity. Most of the people in my country are terrified to go out at night, so they avoid it, but I thought to myself, what's the worst that could happen? But I reminded myself that the only way to confront my fears was to face them head on, just like my karate sensei had told me so many years ago. I looked at my watch, and I had now spent 10 minutes walking downhill. I got to the surveillance booth that is located at my neighborhood's entrance. I said hi to the security guard and went through the gate and kept jogging. After that, I went up another steep street which slowly got me far away from home. I felt pumped up by the heavy metal playlist. However, I noticed that the street was a little dark and creepy, so I increased my speed a little. I jogged in front of a luxurious hotel and was close to my neighborhood. Out of the blue, I started to hear the sound of a slightly strange and spooky chanting in a language I could not understand, even though I'm a great translator. As I kept jogging, I could hear the chanting more clearly. While I continued moving forward, the words became clearer. I thought it was weird because the almost unpronounceable I had heard seemed a little familiar. I don't know why I thought I had read or heard it before in a book or movie. At that moment, I looked at both sides of the road to cross the street. I waited for some cars to pass, and I crossed the street quickly but carefully. I felt a chill down my spine because now the chanting became louder and louder. Even though I was scared, I pressed on since I wanted to know who or what was making that noise. My heavy metal playlist kept me motivated. I passed through a busy hospital from the area and the park that is next to it. Strangely enough, both places are empty tonight. Later on, I took out one of my headphones to listen closely and understand the chanting better, but it was to no avail because I could not understand anything they said. In the distance, I could see 3 people wearing black as night robes with hoodies, which did not let me see their faces. They held some torches in front of them and repeated their chant over and over again. My fear kept increasing, but I kept walking while one of my favorite instrumental songs called The Call of Tulu blasted in my ears, which was based on a famous horror story which was written by one of my favorite writers whose name I won't say here. So I kept jogging, but I did not have the faintest idea about what these people were trying to do. That was when I remembered a pyramid-like monument that always looked weird to me, which was close by after crossing the bridge over a river called Guari. I was terrified and could feel very strange vibes coming from the monument, but I pressed on. I was walking instead of jogging because I was hoping that these people did not see me or know I was approaching them to interrupt their bizarre ritual. Since I was much closer to the area where the strange ceremony was taking place, I could see 6 people dressed in black hooded robes, which did not allow me to see their faces very well, even though their faces were lighted by some torches they held in front of them. They were standing in the shape of a circle inside the walls of the monument and also around a dark red pentagram that was painted on the floor with what appeared to be blood. However, this was not a normal pentagram because it had a strange shape drawn in the center, and it was also on fire, obviously thanks to a flammable liquid such as kerosene or gasoline. In the same way, the torches these people were holding were almost as big as an average sized man. I was in shock, and I thought to myself, did these people make that figure with spray paint or blood? I think I should leave this place at once, but my curiosity is killing me. As the old saying goes, curiosity killed the cat. I stayed hidden behind some bushes that were close to the monument. Suddenly, the chanting started to increase in speed, and they continued until they reached a crescendo. After that, I felt even more scared because I heard a noise like a loud crack, and at that moment, a bright blue small hole started to appear right above the monument along with some small white rays that surrounded it. This hole started to expand little by little, and it sounded as if 100 bees or wasps were flying above the monument. I kept staring at the portal in the sky, and I was asking myself the following: what in the world is that thing? A portal to another dimension? Wow, it looks very similar to the portals in which the robots travel back in time in that old 80s movie. The chanting continued. I was still terrified and in shock. I was not able to explain what I was seeing or hearing in that crazy place, but I wanted to get to the bottom of it all before this ritual ended. Out of the blue, a deep roar started to be heard from inside the portal, which sounded very similar to the strange sound made by a food chopper. Consequently, I could feel how the wind started to blow in a stronger way, and the speed of the chanting started to increase as well. To my absolute horror, I saw a large black tentacle similar to one of an octopus. I felt horrified again. I neither knew nor understood what this portal creature was. The portal attracted my gaze completely, and I could not look away from it. All of a sudden, 5 more tentacles came out of the portal while the chanting continued. Thanks to the presence of these 6 tentacles in the portal, the chanting stopped, and the strange sound kept coming from the portal. It seemed the efforts of these people to invoke whatever they wanted to invoke were successful. Out of nowhere, my fear grew even more because the tentacles moved quickly out of the portal and grabbed 5 people at the same time. In the midst of the chaos, the ones who were captured screamed and begged for mercy, but their shouting and pleas were all for nothing because one of them was decapitated. Another one got his left arm pulled out of its socket. Another one got his torso severed from his waist. There was blood everywhere, and the other 2 were simply dragged into the portal, including the severed body parts. Immediately after that, the portal disappeared in the blink of an eye. The last guy who was left standing noticed this was happening right on time, so he jumped towards some tall bushes and thankfully was able to get away from the evil tentacles. I gasped and pinched myself on my right arm and rubbed my eyes to make sure that what I was seeing was true. Unfortunately, I was not dreaming, and then I shouted, "Holy crap! I cannot believe that strange beast took him away." But unbeknownst to him, the surviving worshiper had heard me and screamed, "Hey, you! What do you think you're doing?" And I said, "Drat, one of them got away and saw me. I better get the heck out of here." I ran away as fast as my legs could carry me, but the other guy threw his torch to the ground, put it out with several stomps, and jumped to get out of the bushes. He came running after me, but I was able to cover a little more ground because I started running before him. I was running fast, but I was followed closely by this maniac, and I didn't know what he was going to do to me to shut me up because people knew about their weird ritual. I quickly ran all the way back to my neighborhood. First, I crossed a small bridge and ran in front of the hospital. The hooded man kept chasing me, and he shouted at me, Stop running! If I catch you, I'll kill you." But I was smart enough to keep running, and I shouted back, "I won't stop running away from you, not on your life." Also, I ran in front of the luxurious hotel until I finally arrived at my neighborhood surveillance booth. I said hi to the security guard, whose name was Jose, and he responded, "Hey dude, tonight's run took longer than usual, huh? What was all that screaming back there?" My pursuer hid behind some tall trees that were placed before arriving in my neighborhood. I quickly looked behind me using the reflection on my skull ring that I usually wore on my right hand, and I responded the following to Jose. "No idea, dude. You know there are some crazy loud people out there at night." Jose did not seem to believe me, but he said, "Oh, okay. Come on in so you can go home. Be careful out there and have a good night." And I responded, "Thanks, same to you, dude." After I said goodbye to Jose, I kept walking up for a few blocks until I got to my building because I was exhausted. I got in the elevator and went up to my apartment. I took a deep sigh and thanked the heavens I was able to get home safe and alive after that terrible ordeal. I opened my apartment door and I could not stop thinking about what happened. I ate a sandwich for dinner. When I went to bed, I had nightmares about the things that I saw. I decided that would be the last time I would run outside my neighborhood late at night, since I did not know if that surviving member of that cult would be waiting for me to kill me. If that were to happen, nobody would even know about it, and there is nothing more terrifying than that. Let me give you a layout of my room. When you walk into my room, on the left wall right in front of you is my closet. In the far right corner is my loft bed laying long ways towards the closet. There is a ladder you have to climb to get up to my bed. Now there is a window right next to my bed that I usually set my glasses on, and diagonally from my bed is my TV that sits on my dresser. Now there is something you need to know about my TV. It makes a distinct sound when you turn it on. At the bottom right corner is a touchscreen on/off button and a volume button, meaning you have to physically touch my TV to turn it on. The prior night, I had stayed up watching The Walking Dead and didn't get much sleep. So the next day, I went to bed early. It was about 9, and I fell asleep relatively quickly. When I woke up, it was 4 a.m. I heard my TV turn on. I was confused, so I turned over, and the blue light radiated from my TV, blinding me. I closed my eyes and sat up. When I opened them, I looked to my door, and there was a shadow figure. I stared at it, and my heart started to race. So I reached over and grabbed my glasses on the windowsill. I put them on and looked back at it, and it was gone. My closet then started to roll open. I sat there frozen when I heard a voice say, "Get out." I then threw my head to the side and saw no one. My closet door slammed shut, and I just sat there and cried. I haven't seen it since, and I now no longer use my closet. The fact that it turned on my TV and told me to get out terrified me, and I hope I don't meet it again. This happened on August 10th, 1985, in Arizona, United States. When we were teenagers, my cousin and I were thick as thieves. Ryan, Rory, and I always hung out with each other, be it on camping trips, days swimming at the lake, or at parties. Summer rolled around, and we decided that we would go camping out in the forest on the Fort Apac reservation. This was beginning to become a yearly tradition. Last year, we had gone camping in the foothills of the San Carlos reservation. It was a blast, and I was actually sad to return home when it was over. We finalized our plans and decided to pack Rory's pickup so we could leave early the next morning. We packed enough supplies for 3 days and enough beer for 10. We set off from our home around 8 in the morning and parked the pickup in a trailer park. We were all excited for the day ahead, and especially for the night of partying. We trekked through the lush green forest. Although the forest was lush and vibrant, there did not seem to be many animals and birds around. The further we walked, the thicker and darker the forest got. At dusk, we decided to make a camp in a clearing that was right next to the trail. We set up our tent, made a fire, and cracked open some beers before it was fully dark. Ryan played some music on his portable boombox, and we drank and danced around the fire. At 1 a.m., we all decided that since this was the first night, we should take it easy and get in bed early. We had miles and miles to trek the next day, and it would be torture doing that tired and hungover. As soon as Ryan turned off his boombox, it struck me how silent the forest was that night. The cicadas and birds usually make some noise after dark, but this night was dead silent. The only sound that we could hear was the light breeze blowing through the trees. A few minutes later, as we were cleaning up the mess we had made, the bushes surrounding the clearing began to rustle. We all turned to face this noise, fearing the worst. We feared that it could be a black bear. We were prepared for this. Rory had brought his handgun to fend off any unfriendly wildlife. It was not a bear that emerged from the bushes, but an Indian forest ranger. He looked to be in his mid-40s and was tightly clutching his shotgun, covered in ashes, to his chest. "You kids shouldn't be out here. This forest is not safe at night," he exclaimed. "We came prepared," Rory joked as he waved his coat around carelessly. The forest ranger pleaded, "At first light, you should pack your things and go home. This forest, people go missing all the time with no trace. Please, just go home." The ranger stared at us for a second after that. Then he turned and went back into the bushes. He vigilantly scanned his surroundings as he went. Shortly after the forest ranger left, there was a foul smell in the wind. My cousins and I joked that the forest ranger probably didn't bathe and the horrible smell was coming from him. We settled down in the tent and all fell asleep pretty quickly. We woke up and noticed that there were some animal tracks through our camp. The hoof prints made them look like they were the track prints of a deer, but it was strange as the way the tracks were laid out made it look like the deer was walking on two legs. I did not think much of this at that time. I was too excited for another day on the trail and another night of partying. We were not scared by what the forest ranger had told us. We just thought that he was probably crazy, a man who has been out in the forest for too long and has started to believe all the old Indian myths. Ryan suggested that we go to camp deeper in the forest away from the trail so we would not encounter that forest ranger again. We all agreed and decided to set off in the direction of the deep forest far from the trail. The rough terrain made the walk extremely tiring. As we walked, I kept getting the feeling that we were being followed, like something was watching us from just out of sight. We trekked for a few miles through thick forest before deciding to make a camp early in a natural clearing that was surrounded by bushes. There was a small stream nearby so we could get some water if we needed to. This camping spot seemed perfect. We got the camp ready for the partying ahead and cracked open some beers. I went to pee in a bush at the side of the camp, and as I approached it, I spotted an old green backpack. I picked it up and it almost fell apart. It looked like the bag had been slashed by a knife. Upon looking inside the bag, I discovered a map of the area, a rusted pocket knife, and an old metal water bottle. "What's this?" Rory asked as he snatched the bag out of my hands. "I don't know, I just found it," I replied. "It was probably from the last victim of the boogeyman," Rory joked. At this point, Ryan pulled a bottle of whiskey from his bag and exclaimed that it was time to do some shots. We forgot all about the tattered bag after that. We drank and partied until about 2 a.m. When we turned the boombox off, again, the silence of the forest startled me. I thought that the forest was possibly devoid of wildlife. The light crackling of the fire was the only thing I could hear. I did not dwell on this thought for long. I was just ready to fall asleep as I was considerably drunker than the previous night, and I am sure my cousins were too. We settled down and fell asleep in the tent. Rory woke me up to tell me that someone was moving about in the camp. I am not sure how long I was asleep for, but the fire was still lit, so it could not have been for more than an hour or so. It's probably that crazy forest ranger again here to tell us that the boogeyman is going to catch us, Ryan huffed. He got up, unzipped the tent, and stepped out. Ryan was frozen on the spot, staring at something when he stepped out of the tent. "Ryan, what is it?" I whispered. Ryan did not react to this. His gaze was locked on something outside the tent. "Ryan," I whispered a little bit louder. Again, he did not react. Roy and I stepped out of the tent behind him to see what the fuss was about. I looked to see what Ryan was staring at, and I saw what looked like a sick deer's head poking up from behind a bush looking to the side. We stared for a few seconds, and it turned to face us. I realized something was wrong. Its eyes glowed yellow, and it looked like it was rotting. Parts of its head did not have flesh on it. You could see the bone of its skull. That same foul smell lingered in the air. Only tonight it was much stronger. When the smell first hit my nose, I almost puked. It rose up from behind the bush, revealing that it was not a deer at all, but some sort of rotting monster. It stood almost 10 feet tall. Its body was much the same as its head. The flesh on its torso was torn, rotting, and you could see some of the bones in its rib cage. It had arms like a human, but instead of fingers, the beast had long, sharp claws. Its legs were like that of a deer, with the same rotting and desiccated look as the rest of its body. Horrified, I dove back into the tent to retrieve my cousin's handgun. I checked to see if it was loaded and quickly re-emerged from the tent. The monster was still staring down at my cousins. Looking at it, I was filled with dread and terror. Rory and Ryan were still frozen. I raised the gun and pointed it at the monster. My hands were trembling so badly to the point that it was hard to target the monster, even though it was standing still. The monster took one step forward as if it was going to charge at us. I attempted to pull the trigger, but it was stuck. I knew the gun was in good condition though. Rory always took care of his guns. The monster did not charge at us. It was as if it was toying with us. It could clearly see how terrified we were. I heard a twig snap loudly behind us. I swung my head around to see another one of these monsters, just as rotten and terrifying as the first one. It made an ear-piercing shriek and pounced on Ryan, cutting his chest as it landed on top of him. Ryan was screaming and bleeding very badly. I tried to shoot the gun again at the thing on top of Ryan, but again, nothing happened. Not knowing what to do, I threw the gun at the monster, hitting it on its head. It was not phased. It was still over my cousin, tearing him limb from limb. Rory and I ran into the pitch-black forest, fearing for our lives. The creature shrieked again. The shriek was like nothing I had ever heard. It filled me with pure terror. I could not think straight because of it. I just ran. I did not have shoes on, and my feet were cut pretty badly by sharp rocks. We ran through the trees for what seemed like hours, but it could not have been for more than about 10 minutes. We found an uprooted tree and hid in the hole where the roots were pulled out. After we got in the hole and caught my breath, Rory looked at me. "Can you smell that?" he whispered. Those were the words he said before his chest was pierced by the long, thin claws. Blood poured out of his mouth, and he looked at me with a confused expression as he was pulled into the darkness. I got up and ran as fast as I could, ignoring the pain from my shredded feet. I could hear his screams as I ran away. I ran for miles until I came across a road. Luckily for me, a truck was driving down the road. I ran out in front of it, and it skidded to a stop. "Let me in!" I screamed frantically. The man opened the passenger door and shot me a strange look. "What are you doing out here in this forest at this time?" he inquired. I didn't answer. I jumped in the truck and slammed the door shut. As we drove away, I looked back at the forest to see two sets of yellow glowing eyes staring at me from the darkness of the forest. I told the sheriff this story when I reported my cousins as missing. He told me I was crazy. I wish I was crazy. I wish I could unsee those vile creatures or write them off as hallucinations. More than 10 years have passed since I lost my cousins. I have never returned to that forest, or any forest, again. Whatever those monsters were, they got a good look at me, and I am sure it would not let me get away again. I just thought it was time to share this true story and maybe find myself some closure. I am a 23-year-old woman from Canada. I won't give away exactly where I live, of course, but I'll try and describe the kind of area I live in. To start off, I am self-employed and have to travel often to make my living. I have seen plenty of odd things, but this one still puts me on edge. When I was 21, I was traveling with my mom back home from an event called a powwow, where I sell crafted items I make. If you are Aboriginal like me, then you know what I'm talking about. If not, then I highly recommend you look into them. To get home from the powwow, we have to go over a high mountain highway. This means there are not very many towns, gas stations, or other forms of civilization until you reach the other side. We were close to the top of the mountain, and I wasn't driving, but I was listening to music like most people my age. I wasn't tired or wired on coffee like I normally am, and I don't do drugs or drink if I'm at powwow, so overall, I'm pretty alert and awake. As I was looking into space, my eye caught on to something in front of us on the side of the road behind a tall fence meant to keep deer and moose off the highway. It was a white object, which was odd. and I honestly thought someone must have lost a tarp off their truck. But as we were coming closer to it, I could see it had legs, arms, and a head. I'm getting a bad chill up my back just rethinking about it now. I felt my heart drop like a weight when I saw it raise its arms up to the top of the fence, where his head will probably be about a foot or two above. So imagine how tall it would be compared to an about 6-foot fence meant for deer. It raised its arms and placed its hands on top of the fence, peering over it as if it's trying to understand how to get to the other side. I think I actually stopped breathing for a moment as we went driving past it, and I didn't dare look away from it. It took me maybe a moment to barely sputter to my mom to go faster. She didn't understand at first why I was suddenly freaking out and barely speaking English. She probably thought I was having a mental breakdown, which wouldn't be too far from the truth. She almost pulled over when I felt her braking and slowing down. I went into fight or flight mode and literally snapped back into reality and screamed at the top of my lungs, "Don't slow down! Go!" I probably continued to swear and nearly cry for about 15 to 20 more minutes. As soon as we got to the next town, we stopped at the first gas station where I had a panic and asthma attack. I even realized I actually bruised my ear from ripping the headphones out of my ears so hard. Eventually, I told her why I screamed at her and freaked out so badly. It was tall, skinny, and had no hair as far as I could see. It had unnaturally long arms and neck. It looked like it had small dark eyes. I couldn't see if it had a mouth from that distance. It was probably shut. But imagine a naked slender man with beady eyes. That's the closest way I can describe it. My mom looked horrified from what I was describing to her. I'm not the kind of person to joke around with things like that. I don't mess around with paranormal things as I've witnessed some stuff that would horrify most people. We ended up stopping at a friend's house to stay the night because we just couldn't drive that extra hour home after that. I didn't even sleep. I was too scared to and was worried that thing would find me. All night, all I could think about was a way to explain it to myself. Like, was I dreaming? Was it TARP after all? Or maybe I was just straight up going insane. The more I try to think of a way to debunk it, the more I realized it was real. And that's horrifying to think something like that exists outside of video games and scary movies. Now I can't help but to look down to the floor between my feet and break into a cold sweat when we go past that area. I won't even drive it myself. I don't know if it was a skinwalker, ghost, or alien, but it felt like I saw something that wasn't meant to be seen. I still have the occasional nightmare from it, and I hate talking about it with my elders, friends, or family because, to be honest, I think I have a bit of PTSD from this encounter. So as a child, I had an imaginary friend. Its name was Simon. Well, at least that's what I called it. I'm not sure what gender it was. Simon was literally black, like entirely black, all except his eyes and hands that were blood red. It stood about 7 feet tall and mostly appeared out of the corner of my eye. It hates light. It only shows up when it's pitch black. I'm not entirely sure when I started seeing it, but as a kid, I wasn't put off by its creepy figure or odd behavior. I never really paid any mind to it. The only thing I do is talk to it late at night. Now this is the thing I want to point out. I still see it. Very rarely, but sometimes when I lay in my bed in the darkness, I can see it from the corner of my eyes, right by my closed door. I'm not scared, I'm just confused. Because I'm 19 now, and yet I still see it. No one else can, and I've never told anyone about what I see. The last time I saw it was about 2 weeks ago, and for the first time, it spoke, also revealing more of itself. According to it, its name is Parker, not Simon, as I had given it. And by the sound of its voice, it's a male. In the darkness, I was able to make out green eyes, not red, and its hair seemed to be either pink or purple and curly. But that's all I could make out. And he's not 7 feet tall, so I assumed what I was able to make out was its true form. So I haven't done much to research into this, but what I experienced about 9 to 10 years ago, I can only describe as sleep paralysis while awake. I'm not sure if that is even a thing. It was about 2 or so in the afternoon in the spring. The sun was shining and the birds were chirping outside. I was on the phone with my then boyfriend, and I was laying on my bed facing the wall. We were talking about this and that and whatever else. In the middle of the conversation, I suddenly began to experience the clammy cold sweats. I wasn't sick or even had an inkling of getting sick, but I was sweating cold bullets. I brushed it off as change in the climate or whatever. Not even a moment later, I suddenly felt the most immense presence behind me. Like you know how sometimes you feel like someone is watching you? Multiply that times 1,000 and have someone standing directly behind and over you. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. I was absolutely terrified. Whatever was behind me was not my friend, and it was there to do harm. I felt my chest suddenly explode with immense cold, like whatever this thing was had reached into my body through my back and was squeezing my heart and lungs. I have no idea how long this went on. I was only briefly brought back to the fact that my then boyfriend was yelling over the phone asking what was wrong. I was sobbing and whimpering and I didn't even realize it. I managed to wheeze out that something was here and I couldn't breathe. What was strange was that he didn't even question what I meant and didn't even skip a beat before telling me to say a prayer. Any prayer. So I did. I started squeaking out the Lord's Prayer as best as I could, and in an instant, I felt the coldness leave my chest, and I let in the biggest breath of air I've ever taken, like I'd been held underwater for way too long, and I finally had made it to the surface. I found myself able to move, and I turned around to find nothing. Not even the feeling of that evil presence anymore. I have no idea what it wanted with me or why it was trying to harm me. I've never experienced a moment like that again, at least not with an evil presence, and I don't care to. So we used to go and have canyon parties in the desert every weekend. We would find crazy, obscure spots, so there was no way the police could find us. The place we were at this week was called the Planetarium because it was up on a plateau, so you could see the stars go all the way to the ground. Idaho is extremely mountainous, so this is incredibly rare. Usually, you only see the small upper section of the stars. I always had trouble staying asleep the next morning after drinking. I still do. I would get maybe 2 to 3 hours of sleep and then be wide awake while, of course, everyone else is sleeping off their hangover. I would be wide awake by 5 a.m. cooking breakfast, etc. I want to mention at this point there is an Air Force base maybe 100 miles as the crow flies to the west of the planetarium, which may or may not be relevant. An INL, or Idaho National Laboratory, maybe 100 miles as the crow flies to the east. I'll talk more about that later. Okay, so I went to bed the night we partied at the planetarium around 2 a.m. I woke up just as you could see the light changing from the dark of night to the light blue of morning. I had never seen the sunrise from such an angle where I had the high ground. Usually, by the time I see the sun peak the mountains, it had already been light out for over an hour, so I decided I wanted to take this opportunity to see what it's like to watch the night turn to day, from total darkness to daylight, while being able to observe the sun crest the actual horizon. I grabbed a pack of cigarettes and a beer and went found a nice comfortable rock I could sit on facing east. It was by far the most amazing sunrise I had ever seen because I was able to watch all the subtle changes in color, second to second, within the sky, the landscape, and the rocks and plants around me. The colors were literally moving in layers, quick and fleeting layers, one after another, to the point where my brain was almost unable to keep up with the speed it was all coming at me. I sat there for I'm not sure how long, at least an hour, maybe 2, as the sky and landscape around me went from starry and inky black to full daylight. It was indescribable. I was elated, just smiling ear to ear with what I had just witnessed, and it was just for me. No one else had been on that spot on this planet on that morning and had witnessed what I alone had just witnessed and so thoroughly enjoyed what I personally had just experienced. The sun was now high enough in the sky. I realized that the transition was over. I was taking my last couple drags of my last cigarette before I was going to get up and turn around to cook breakfast. Right as I had this thought, I heard what sounded like a giant bird flapping its wings to take off. You know the sound I'm talking about, but this was loud, right behind me, and startled me beyond belief. In flight or fight for a millisecond, my brain considered the fact that an eagle thought I was prey. Irrational, I know, but survival had kicked in. I turned to see a 7 to 8 foot bird taking off behind me. I say bird with a question mark because, to be honest, what it looked like was a man with a mask on, making him look like he had the beak of a parrot or toucan or some jungle bird and a bird suit. It was multicolor, iridescent, and very convincing as a bird. The same with his wings and feathers and everything. Everything about it was a bird other than the fact he was man-shaped and a good 2 feet taller than me. It was as if this thing had read my mind, realized I was just about to stand up and turn around, and he, or it, was startled by the fact that if I had turned around then, I would see him. I heard those wings flutter and flap. I turned around and saw this thing for a split second as it spread its wings, which was about a 20 to 25 foot wingspan. It flapped its wings once, with so much force that it propelled into the sky at a rate of speed faster than a fighter jet with absolutely no sound. I saw it, way up there in the sky. It had made it so incredibly far with just one flap of his wings that it was up amongst the clouds. He stopped there for just a moment before he spread those immense wings once more, and when he flapped them that second time, he was gone to the south in a streak. I don't know how to explain what I felt exactly at that moment. I was not on any drugs other than a breakfast Budweiser and nicotine, and I knew what I had just seen. I wasn't in shock. I wasn't even stunned, really. I was just in awe of what I had just witnessed. There was no way it was a trick of the eye or a trick of the mind or any of that. I guess I just had no frame of reference in my life experience files to compare this to. I knew what I had just seen was real, and I knew there was nothing in this world that is real that it could have been. Back then I thought for sure it was an alien, a god to the ancients, a thunderbird to the natives, Kukulkan to the Maya. Today, I wonder if it may have been some sort of suit, some sort of technology. Who is it to say these things are not one and the same? The thing I think about the most these days when I think of the story is, how long had it been there? Maybe 6 feet behind me, watching the sunrise with me, watching me watch the sunrise, and he enjoying just how much I was enjoying this sunrise. Just choosing to take the time to appreciate the beauty of this planet, but the Homo sapien who was appreciating the beauty of this planet and had absolutely no idea he was doing so. If it was there to take me as prey, it very much could have done that. That's not why he was there. He didn't act like a predator when I saw him. He acted like he was caught, like I was never supposed to see him. I have many more stories of the deserts of Idaho. Idaho is one of the largest and most sparsely populated states, with vast, vast expanses of terrain for anything to hide, test, or make their home. Just simply live, without ever coming within 100 miles of a human unless they want to. I spoke of INL, or Idaho National Laboratory, earlier, which has a huge facility in the desert near Acro and is so incredibly secretive about what they do there that basically the public has absolutely no idea. They say it is a matter of national security. I do know for sure the security there is just as bad as Area 51 because a buddy of mine who is a paraglider got caught in some massive thermals, accidentally landed on INL property, and was promptly accosted by and escorted to the highway by a pair of security guards in a military Humvee, military uniforms with automatic weapons, and German Shepherds. I'm just adding context here. If the military were going to test something secretive, they wouldn't do it in Area 51 where everyone is watching. They would do it in some place no one is even aware there is a facility. When I was in high school, I had a friend that had passed away. Soon after his passing, many of my friends asked if I had any ghostly visitation from him because they were seeing him and experiencing strange things. I told them no and was weirded out by what they had said. That night, my auntie had asked me to babysit at her apartment. I, knowing that my deceased friend had lived on the top floor, was not bothered by it, but just was focused on getting paid. Later that night, I had put the kids to sleep and turned off all the lights and called it a night. I was watching TV and was comfortably laying on the living room couch with a throw blanket on. As I was starting to fall asleep, I heard footsteps coming from the bedroom and into the dark hallway. It gently progressed into loud footsteps because it was getting closer, but as soon as it was about to reach the TV light, nothing came out. By the 4th or 5th time of sitting up and seeing nothing, I was fed up and ignored it. I came to the conclusion that it just may be the people upstairs were just using the bathroom frequently at 1 a.m., so I ignored it and tried to catch some sleep. Suddenly, I heard the noise of a plastic cup being thrown onto the kitchen floor with force and anger, literally bouncing all over violently. Startled and frightened, I finally put two and two together and remembered what my friends were trying to explain to me earlier that day. I threw the blanket over my head and my eyes closed tight. Just when I thought it was over, I heard a voice mumbling incoherently behind my head. I heard it as clear as day. Now I have the blanket over my head, eyes closed, and hands over my ears. I don't know how long I was under the blanket. All I know is that as soon as my auntie stepped foot into the apartment, I was gone. After that experience, I'm not sure what to make of it. I never heard or saw anything strange, never even had one dream of him. Everything just went quiet after that. I was quite baffled by it. Guess he wanted to go out with a bang. That's my most profound experience. It has opened up my eyes to something more after death. Maybe it is something that is not meant for the living to understand. Maybe one will only know what becomes of us when our time is up. The dead is not meant for the living to know. The events that took place started when I was 7 and went on until I was 15 years of age. I grew up in a small town in central West Virginia in a trailer park outside of town. I lived with my two older sisters, 4 and 5 years older than me, my mother and her boyfriend Stan. While we were new to the town, Stan grew up there and knew several people. He was actually the town drug dealer. Anywho, soon after moving into this trailer park, my family began being stalked by a subject we eventually called the Creeper. One night, while watching TV in the back bedroom, I became anxious, as if I was being watched. I tried to look out the window, but had trouble seeing as the light in the room was on, causing a reflection. As I got closer to the window, I saw eyes, and a face slowly came into focus. I totally spazzed out. Throughout the span of 6 years, I've seen this man's hand slide the window down. I've seen him grab for objects, such as a duffel bag next to the window. I've seen him slam his hand against the bathroom window and slowly drag it down as I got out of the shower. The Creeper would steal forks from the silverware drawer and panties from my sister's drawers. It would place rocks neatly on the bed and leave every light on and every door open. We started to leave notes saying, "Dear Mr. Creeper, please shut off the lights and close the doors when you leave. P.S. We are running out of forks." One night, we came home to find our bird Corey dead in his cage, hung by its wings. We figured out the subject was a man named Ronald. When we talked about him, we would say Ron Ron, the peeping Tom. He was friends with Stan, who was also friends with Ronald's brother, Kenny. Stan and Kenny would often plan stakeouts to catch the Creeper, such as hide in the tree line at night, waiting for him to strike. The only problem was Kenny would tell Ronald about the stakeouts, not knowing he was the Creeper. Anywho, one night when I was 12, I was at a neighbor's house while my mom was at work. Stan had moved out at this point, and my sisters were staying with friends. I decided to go to my house to grab some overnight necessities. When I got home, I noticed the front door was open and the lights were on. I walked into the house expecting to find my sisters. When I entered the house, I said, "Hello, is anyone home?" I then walked down the hallway towards the bathroom. As I did, a man wearing all black and a ski mask came creeping out of the back bedroom, slightly bent over. When he saw me, he stood up straight and walked closer to me. He stopped next to the back door, which was 5 feet in front of me, and looked me up and down as if he expected me to scream. Instead, I became one with the room. I had no fight or flight, no movement, no sound. Thankfully, he then ran out the back door. At that moment, I called for help. About 2 years later, with ongoing activity, I was sitting in the road next to Ronald's, which was the Creeper's, trailer. He lived with his father at the time. While we were talking, we were approached by Ronald around 9:30 p.m. He asked us if we had been sitting there long and how long we planned on staying. We told him we weren't sure and thought nothing of it. Ronald then walked back from his trailer towards another area of the park. Soon after, we saw a masked subject dressed in black approach Ronald's trailer. The subject slid open the back window and proceeded to climb in. Upon witnessing this, we went to a neighbor's house and called 911. We then went back and sat in the same area as before while we waited for the police to arrive. When the police arrived, a few officers went to the window the subject had entered, and 2 others went to the front door. Ronald answered the back window and spoke to the officers. When questioned, Ronald stated he heard something setting off fireworks and he wanted to check it out. False, there were no fireworks. When he was asked why he would enter through his bedroom window, he replied, "That's just how I felt like getting in." When his father was questioned, he advised officers he and his son were the only ones home. He advised officers his son was already in bed. So for several years after this, I was an anxious mess. I would stay awake at night listening for strange noises, even after moving several times. I would leave the kitchen stove light on and my bedroom door open looking for shadows on the walls. It took a long time for me to overcome the PTSD. I have since moved out of state. Several years later, I received a phone call from a childhood friend of mine who was familiar with the creeper. She told me the suspected creeper had passed away from a heart attack. I don't wish death on anyone, but I'm glad he can't taunt another family as he did mine. So I was about 16, and my sister and I were walking back from the BP in my town. We see this girl in her early 20s being screamed at by this man in a white car. We ran up to her asking if she's alright. She was crying so hard. She said her boyfriend just hit her. I called the police and we took her back to the BP to wait for them to show up. He followed us there, and he got out of the car screaming and hit her in the face and tried to drag her in the car. My sister and I kept a hold of her until this tall dude stepped in and restrained him until the police showed up and he got arrested for domestic abuse and attempted kidnapping.